So this week you're going to be studying cellular respiration, and you will have gotten lectures from your lecture instructor on cellular respiration. You'll be hearing mine. You'll be working through SimBio in lab this week. Um, I'll tell you more about that in my "What am I doing in lab this week" thing. Um, and you might wonder, why do I need to hear it so many times? It's just the way the human mind works. If There are very few concepts once you're here at this level of biology that you will hear one lecture and your mind will go, oh, well, that's just so clear and obvious, right? You know, particularly complicated topics like cellular respiration, if you hear different instructors explain it from different points of views, even using different analogy, then your brain finds the pattern inside of that, and that can make it clear for you. So I encourage you, even though it seems redundant, to listen to it from different points of view. And even after you're done with this, maybe go to Amoeba Sisters or Crash Course and listen to them explain it as well. Cellular respiration has nothing to do directly with breathing. Yeah, breathing when we go, yes, we do call that respiration in physiology. But cellular respiration is actually a series of biochemical reactions that explain how the mitochondria inside of your cells um, use oxygen and CO2 to create the molecule ATP, which is sort of the energy source that powers your cells and powers life. So whenever I think about cellular respiration, and like you, I was not eager to learn it. Okay, maybe you are eager to learn it, but the way I found it interesting is it explains how these desert rodents live their entire lifetimes without ever drinking water. These are different desert rodents. Actually, this one is a marsupial, so technically not a rodent, but these guys look a lot alike, even though they're not closely related to each other at all. And they hop around and live in the desert and never drink water. And the reason they can live in the desert without ever drinking water is because they've decreased the amount of water that they lose. And so the water that they gain through cellular respiration ends up being enough to allow them to survive their entire lives without drinking water. And we'll talk about where that water comes from as we go through here. So cellular respiration. One of the things you will need to know for your lab quiz is just what is the formula for cellular respiration? And it is glucose, which is C6H12O6, plus oxygen, and then over many biochemical reactions, not a single step, we'll end up making 6 carbon dioxides plus 6 water molecules. These 6 water molecules that get made by cellular respiration from, by the way, glucose, which is found in starch, and oxygen, these 6 water molecules that get made, that is what those desert rodents, our own kangaroo, rat, and the Egyptian jerboa, that's enough water for them to live an entire lifetime. They just eat starch like in a grain of something, and then they magically make water. Now, we're not going to be focusing entirely on that. We're going to be focusing on how there are around 38 ATP molecules that get made ultimately in this process. And ATP, adenosine triphosphate, in the SimBio is very elegantly explained with a very cool analogy that you can make happen, that those ATP molecules create the energy that make things happen in the cells. I very often think of ATP as kind of being like electricity. I actually think of ATP molecules as being charged batteries. And if you add battery power, you could make technically almost anything happen inside of your home. You could use a battery powered hair dryer. You could use a battery powered microwave. You could use a battery powered a refrigerator, right? If you had the electricity in batteries, anything that gets powered by electricity, you could make it happen. Well, the cell is like that. All the different things that the cell needs to do, like powering the TV or powering the toaster oven, all of those things you could make happen with ATP. Okay. Let's talk a little bit about the mitochondria, because the mitochondria is the secret to making cellular respiration efficient. Um, Remember that the mitochondria is the descendant of ancient bacteria that became uh, pets or captives or farm animals inside of our cells. And there's one outer membrane, and then there's an inner membrane. Okay, that inner membrane, the wiggly one, that inner membrane, that is where all of the really exciting stuff kind of happens inside of a mitochondria. Um, and we're going to see that without the mitochondria, very little ATP can be made, and actually oxygen doesn't really get used up at all. In terms of all of the parts of your cell, the only part of your cell that really uses oxygen is the mitochondria. So let's talk a little bit about chemical energy. Chemical energy is a form of potential energy. So remember, we learned about the different bonds that get formed. It's hard to make a bond very often, particularly a covalent bond. But once a covalent bond is formed, that covalent bond is kind of like a charged battery. Once the chemical bond gets formed, energy gets stored there in the form of potential energy. And when you break the bond, you release the potential energy. So the gasoline molecules had lots of chemical bonds inside of them. When we use oxygen in our internal combustion engines to break those bonds, then energy gets released, and that'll be kinetic energy. The kinetic energy, some of it is used to move the car. In burning gasoline in our automobiles, we waste a lot of the potential energy that gets stored, and that wasted energy is released as heat. The chemical reactions of aerobic cellular respiration releases a little bit of heat, but it releases much less of that potential energy as this wasteful heat energy than your car does. Your car is a very inefficient way of releasing potential energy, and it's combustion. So it's an uncontrolled oxidation reaction. Cellular respiration is a very controlled oxidation reaction. And yes, some heat is released, but relative to what your car does, less heat and more energy for doing work in the form of ATP is released. Now, in the case of both situations, a completely effective, efficient combustion reaction would release just carbon dioxide and water. It's just that our cars are not 100% efficient. And relatively speaking, our cells and our mitochondria are much more efficient. Let's talk about ATP. These letters, ATP, stand for adenosine triphosphate. Adenosine triphosphate. And adenosine triphosphate is the compound that directly provides energy for most cellular work. So adenosine triphosphate is like a charged battery. Yeah, like a charged battery. The energy gets stored when a phosphate group gets added to make the ATP. Let's look at that. So here we have got, let's go to the next slide. Here we've got ADP and a phosphate molecule. This would be like a dead battery. but it's a dead rechargeable battery. Dead rechargeable battery. And this dead rechargeable battery, if we add the phosphate back to it, we've got a charged battery. And then when we use it, the process that uses the energy in the battery pops off the phosphate, and then we've got a dead rechargeable battery, and then cellular respiration puts the phosphate back on, we've charged it back up, then it gets used, the ATP gets used, and then it's a dead rechargeable battery. So ATP, adenosine triphosphate, is the charged battery, and you can plug it into another molecule, and that molecule will use up the energy and then produce the dead rechargeable battery. And then cellular respiration charges the battery again. Okay. So adenosine triphosphate, that's the charged up battery. And when the charged up battery gets its energy used by a machine, a molecule that needs that energy, then it ends up creating, ADP, adenosine diphosphate. Di means two, and then the phosphate. But no worries, because these two things here, the adenosine diphosphate and the phosphate, those go back into this cellular respiration thing again, and it gets recharged again. Okay? So adenosine triphosphate is like the charged battery, and the energy in it gets used by other molecules when the ATP transfers its phosphate group, actually when that bond gets broken. And then we've got a dead battery, and that dead battery gets recharged, and that happens over and over and over again. Okay? So ADP not charged, ATP charged, and it keeps charging and uncharging over and over and over again. Right? We're going to start here at the beginning of the next lecture.